Good morning. Happy Easter and happy Passover to all, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tarpon Springs. My name is Diana Reif, and I am privileged to be your service associate today for our abbreviated remote service. We are working hard to get the kinks out of this new technology. In fact, our whole lives have changed, haven't they? Personally, you may have noticed my new do. Thanks to the newly discovered hair cutting skills of my husband, Udo. We are honored to have the Reverend Jim Macomber with us again today. He is a retired UU minister who, lucky for us, lives in Palm Harbor. As the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tarpon Springs, we have a threefold mission. We are a liberal community for all ages, promoting spiritual growth, social justice, and the arts.
Carry your candle, run to the darkness, seek out the hopeless, confused and torn. Hold out your candle for all to see it. Take your candle, go light your world. Our first hymn today is Morning Has Broken. The words are on your screen. Please join in and sing with me. I have to change my levers here. Right key. Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the word. Mine is the morning, born of the one light, Eden saw play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day. Sweet the rains do fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness where his feet press. At this time, I would like to introduce Reverend Jim Macomber, who will give us some words for inspiration.
Thank you for allowing me to share some thoughts with you as we struggle to remain in community with one another throughout this uncertain period of self-isolation in which we find ourselves. This is a religiously important time because our calendars show that Jewish Passover and Christian Easter nearly coincide this week. It's also important to Unitarian Universalists because many of our congregations hold their annual flower communion this week. This year, of course, all these celebrations are necessarily different, challenging. But let us picture in our minds bouquets of spring flowers and hold the hope that when the time comes for flower communion next year, we will be able to gather together and give thanks for the beauty we find in nature's spring rebirth. For inspiration, I've chosen a story from the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah is a collection of mystical wisdom, stories, and writings, originally a part of the Jewish oral tradition. The story is entitled "The Best Flower in the Garden." As summer came to an end, all of the flowers in the garden wanted to know which flower was the best. The pink roses said, "We are the best because we were the first flowers to bloom in the spring." The white daisy said, "Oh no, we are the best because we have pretty flowers all summer long." The big yellow mum said, "Don't be silly. We are the best because we are the last flowers to bloom in the autumn." Each flower argued that they were the best, but when people came to see the garden, they stopped. All the flowers were quiet and looked very proud, so people would say that they were the best. One day the gardener came into the garden. The pink roses fluffed their petals so that they would look their best. All of the white daisies stood up tall so that they would look the best. The yellow mums beamed in the sunlight so that they would look the best. All the flowers were sure that the gardener would say they were the best. But the gardener only smiled and said, "Look at all my pretty flowers." The gardener took a basket and began to put the pink roses into it. The roses were sure they were special because they were picked first. But the daisies just laughed at the roses. "Aha, you are not pretty enough to stay in the garden." Next, the gardener put some daisies in the basket, and the mums began to laugh. "I told you, we are the best because we are the only flowers left in the garden." Finally, the gardener put the mums into the basket. Again, all the flowers began to fight over who was the best. When the gardener got to the house, he began to put all of the beautiful flowers into a vase. First, he put the pink roses into the vase, remembering that they were the first flowers to bloom in the spring. Next, he put the yellow daisies into the vase and thought how wonderful to see them every day when he walked in the garden. Finally, he put the mums into the vase. He was very excited to finally see the autumn flowers. He'd been waiting for them all summer long. The gardener put the vase on the table and said, "I have the prettiest bouquet of flowers. Alone, each flower is the best, but together they look perfect." Suddenly, the flowers realized that all along, each one was the best that they could be. But it wasn't until the gardener made a bouquet of all of the flowers together that they became something special. At last, all the flowers were happy. So ends our story. And please join me in a moment of silence.
Spirit of life, come to me. Say in my heart all the truth. Our special music this week is from our hymnal, the Teal hymnal, and it's called Lean on Me. And it's a popular song and written by Bill Withers. And it was one of his most popular songs that he ever wrote. He grew up in Slab Fork, West Virginia, and his family was very poor, as was really the whole town was quite poor. And so because of that, they had to lean on one another to keep everyone going. And so this song was actually a song about his experience growing up there in West Virginia.
Sometimes in our lives we all have pain, we all have sorrow, but if we arise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. It won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Please swallow your pride. If I have things you need to borrow, for no one can fill those of your needs that you won't let show. Lean on me when you're not strong. I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. For it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. If there is a load you have to bear that you can carry, right up the road, I'll share your load. If you just call me, you just call my number when you need a friend. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you understand. We all need somebody to lean on. So just call me, just call me. You just call me.
The offering for the work and the welfare of this church will now be given and received. Please go to our website, uutarpon.org, or mail your offering to 57 Reed Street. The rest of the address is there on your screen. I would like to introduce our speaker right now with a message for the day, Reverend Jim Macomber.
Thank you, Bonnie. It's another Easter week, Passover week too. Another religious week that we Unitarian Universalists don't always know exactly what to do with. But it's always a good time to think about hope and how we get along in the world. So let me begin with a story. Some years ago, I was on my way to Atlanta from New York. I had just moved from New Mexico to Long Island to serve as interim minister of our congregation in Stony Brook. I was traveling to Atlanta to perform my son's wedding. In going through security at the Islip Airport, a TSA agent pointed out to me that my New Mexico driver's license was expired. I had been in New York only a couple of weeks, and I was well within both states' 30-day grace period. They did allow me to get on the plane, but I was traveling on an expired license. Of course, I stewed about it the entire flight because I was going to need a rental car in Atlanta. Surely they'd refuse the rental if I presented an expired license. Now, I knew my driving skills had not suddenly deserted me, but there was this pesky legality of that expiration date. I rationalized my way out of this ethical dilemma and concluded that I never did completely buy into Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative. You know, that we must always be absolutely truthful, even in the face of great inconvenience. I'd go ahead and attempt the rental. Having gone this far, I realized I needed a strategy. I needed a distraction, and I needed to create it. I needed to distract the rental car agent so that they would not see the pesky expiration date on that driver's license. Now, we Unitarian Universalists, and especially UU ministers, tend to be pretty quiet in public about what we do when we find ourselves in the Bible Belt, especially when we're right there at the belt buckle. I simply don't ordinarily engage cashiers, hotel desk clerks, or rental car agents in conversations about my personal religious life. I try to be pleasant and polite, of course, during such encounters, but we have come together to complete a business transaction. That is our purpose, and I generally try to stay on task. But this transaction needed to be a little different from the usual. I needed to distract that agent, if only for a minute or two. So when I got to the rental counter eventually in the airport in Atlanta, I was ready, handing him my credit card and license, of course, the credit card on top of the license. I began spewing facts that I would have ordinarily kept to myself. I'm a minister. I'm here for a wedding. It's my son's wedding. I'm doing the service, and I'm tremendously excited by all of it. The agent smiled and asked, "What denomination?" For a split second, I thought, uh-oh, Bible Belt. What's he going to think? But I sucked it up and said, Unitarian Universalist. He gushed. Oh, I love the Unitarians. I'm not sure if my sigh of relief was audible, but he added, if I weren't going to a really great Episcopal church, I'd be going to one of yours. Y'all are so welcoming. What luck. He ran the credit card and barely glanced at the license. My little subterfuge succeeded. Or was it something else? Perhaps it wasn't just luck. Perhaps it was karma. I thanked those unknown fellow UUs who did whatever they did to make this man feel affection for Unitarian Universalists. It was an eventful weekend, all about celebration and reunion, all the kids in the same town at once. It was most unusual. There were no repercussions from the license problem, and I did obtain a proper New York license as soon as I got back to Long Island. And I'm sharing this story in part because I'm sure the statute of limitations has run out by now. And in contemplating our humanness, a reminder that no one is beyond reproach is appropriate. Maybe I've just felt in the intervening years a need to fess up to someone, preferably in a place where no harsh judgment will befall me. But why at Easter, at Passover? Perhaps it's because we Unitarian Universalists worry a little bit at this time of year about being outed as not really very religious, as if we were practicing religion with an expired license. We have no creed, no set of beliefs that we're supposed to subscribe to, but we do have sources from our religious outlook and our growing religious tradition. One of these sources is this: Jewish and Christian teachings, which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. It's about the teachings and not the miracles. We often fear we're going to get involved in some sort of debate, or worse, be condemned, because we often draw the line at literal miracles. Angels passing over our houses because we smeared our doors, signaling our exemption from the most terrible plague, or the bodily disappearance and resurrection of our wise teacher after his violent and bloody execution. Both of these miraculous stories test our literal credulity. And because so many of us draw the line at miracles, we may worry that we have nothing to say at this time of year, that our religious license has somehow expired. This is absolutely not the case. It's not about the miracles. It's about the teachings. Our Unitarian Universalist roots are inextricably embedded in the teachings of Judaism and Christianity. There is no expiration date on this embeddedness. At the same time, we sometimes get the notion that our aversion to miracles, to the suspension of natural law commonly found in ancient literature, somehow makes us UUs more mature than those who take Jesus to be their personal savior or believe in the Christian image of God. In truth, it doesn't matter whether nature is the product of random evolution or whether there was or is some creative entity that designed the DNA double helix. Nature is what it is. But if you're going to be a Unitarian Universalist, you need to demonstrate a respect for the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Thus are we called to do at the most fundamental level. There's nothing in that principle about being restricted only to those who think or act like we do in honoring that principle. What we do need to do, what we are called to do, I believe, is to welcome everyone to the table, to maintain our open, welcoming religious communities. If we do, not very many folks are going to feel compelled to examine our license to be. Instead, we're going to find rental car agents and many others who will say without any prompting, "Oh, I love the Unitarian Universalists." However, let us remember that to be loved requires giving love. And that's good advice this Holy Week. May it be so, and amen. Please join Bonnie in our closing hymn, De Colores.
All the colors, yes, the colors we see in the springtime with all of its flowers. All the colors, when the sunshine pours out through a rift in the clouds and it showers. All the colors, as a rainbow appears when a storm cloud is touched by the sun. All the colors of love for the whole world around and for everyone under the sun. All the colors, yes, the colors of people parading on high with their banners. All the colors, yes, the colors of cannons and streamers and flags and bandanas. All the colors, yes, the colors of people who know that their freedom is won. All the colors of love for the whole world around and for everyone under the sun. Y por estos los grandes amores de mucho colores me gustan a mí. Carry your candle, run through the darkness, seek out the hopeless, confused and torn. Hold out your candle for all to see it. Take your candle, go light your world.
And now let us have some closing words for the day.
UU congregation is moving forward in these difficult times. Thank you, Reverend Jim Macomber, for your words of inspiration. To Barbara Kataka for her beautiful flower photo. She actually grew the beautiful stargazer lily herself. Thanks to Tommy Frayne, who has figured out, directed, and delivered our online services, and Bonnie Whitehurst, who provides our wonderful music. Jean Nelson and the Phone Tree volunteers have made sure of that the needs of all of our members and friends are being met. Thank you all. Now go in peace.